Okay. Yeah. So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Professor François Foulon. I'm the chair of the Nuclear Engineering Department and also director of the Emirates Nuclear Technology Center at Khalifa University of Science and Technology in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates. I have really the honor and the privilege to welcome His Excellency Rafael Mariano Grossi, the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA. This is a real pleasure to have, in fact, my former director and AEA colleague visiting us at this important stage of the UAE nuclear energy program. His Excellency is a diplomat with over 35 years of experience in the field of non-proliferation and disarmament. In 2013, he has been appointed the ambassador of Argentina to Austria and also the Argentine representative to the IAEA and the other Vienna-based UN and international organizations. In December 2019, he has been appointed the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency by the organization's Board of Governors. His Excellency is in Abu Dhabi to lead IAEA delegation to the UAE that aims to strengthen the UAE-IAEA cooperation, as well as to witness the progress of the UAE nuclear energy program. This program consists in the construction of 4 1,400 megawatt nuclear power plant units at Baraka site that the Director General visited yesterday. Those 2 of these units are being already operational and connected to the grid. This Baraka nuclear energy plant is an important part of the UAE's efforts to diversify its energy sources and to provide clean and efficient energy while reducing the nation's carbon footprints. When fully operational, these 4 units will save UAE up to 21 million of tons of carbon emission every year. I think this is an important contribution to the energy mix and to the vision of the UAE for 2030 in this regard. His Excellency will deliver a lecture on nuclear energy cooperation in the UAE. This lecture being organized in collaboration with the UAE Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation. Before giving the floor to His Excellency for his lecture, I would like to invite Dr. Arif Sultan Al-Ahmadi, the Executive Vice President at Khalifa University of Science and Technology, to give his welcome remarks.
Your Excellency, Rafael Mariano Grossi, Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA. Your Excellency Hamad Al-Ka'bi, Ambassador and Residence Representative of the Permanent Mission of the United Arab Emirates to the IAEA. Officials and representatives from the International Atomic Energy Agency, the UAE government, faculty, and students. A very warm welcome to Khalifa University and today's lecture on collaborating to advance nuclear energy in the UAE and beyond. We are proud to host the high-level delegation from the IAEA and stakeholders from the UAE government today. Only a few days ago, on 6th of September, UAE country program framework, CPF, for the period of 2021-2027 was signed by His Excellency Ambassador Hamad Al-Ka'bi and at the IAEA headquarters in Vienna in Austria. As you know, the CPF identifies 4 priority areas: nuclear energy and infrastructure, nuclear and radiation safety and security, human health, and food and agriculture. We are delighted to point out that Khalifa University plays proactive and productive role in contributing to the UAE peaceful nuclear energy program, especially through collaborating with the government stakeholders and through our research program covering all the above aspects of the CPF. In October this year, Khalifa University collaborated with Emirates Nuclear Energy Corporation, ENIC, and the UAE Federal Authority for Nuclear Regulation, FANR, to host leaders of the world nuclear energy community for the Arab region first International Congress on advances in nuclear power plant to discuss the industry future directions. And we are also glad to point out that our on-campus research center on nuclear energy, the Emirates Nuclear Technology Center, is at present addressing the present and the future research requirements to support the UAE nuclear power program. The center focuses on nuclear safety and systems, nuclear material and chemistry, as well as radiation safety and environment. We are also supporting our stakeholders in the delivery of safe, clean, and efficient nuclear energy to meet Abu Dhabi Vision 2030 and the UAE National Energy Strategy 2050, while protecting the public, the workers, and the environment. Our alumni are working with both ENIC, FANR, and other entities, a strong indication of the role we play in developing human capital that is relevant to the UAE and region. So far, Khalifa University has graduated and trained nearly 400 Emirati and international professionals who contributed to the nuclear sector here in the UAE. Once again, our hearty welcome to His Excellency Rafael Mariano Grossi, Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, to Khalifa University and to the UAE. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Arif, for your welcome remarks. I now will give the floor to His Excellency Rafael Mariano Grossi for his lecture entitled Collaborating to Advance Nuclear Energy in the UAE and Beyond. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Arif, Ambassador Al-Kabi, dear professor, dear friends. It is really a privilege to be here with you today to share some ideas that go perhaps a little bit beyond what the very succinct title of my talk today reveals, since there is so much to think about and to say about nuclear and how this melts into a wider scene as we see it today. I would, with your permission, I would like to share these few thoughts, and if there is an opportunity, what I would really like is to have some exchange at the end of my presentation, listen to you, your ideas. I'm sure you must have comments or questions about these very important issues. But let me say first how privileged I feel to be here in your school. Coming to places of knowledge is, for an international civil servant like myself, a must do. We should never lose touch with the realities of our world, and of course the places where people are educated, whether new professionals, the new generations that are going to be leading in these and other areas are trained, is fundamental. So I take this in the course of this, my first visit to the Emirates as Director General, as a very important, very meaningful visit I'm making here. You, as the Vice President just said, the collaboration, the work, the joint work between the IAEA and Khalifa University is ongoing. we in the IAEA, given the particular nature of this international organization, which is an international organization which is very practical and it's aimed at concrete projects all over the world on the peaceful uses of nuclear energy, we have a system of linking and partnering with what we call collaborating centers. There are not so many in the world. We are a bit picky because we look for excellence. And Khalifa University has been and will continue to be one of those collaborating centers. The important thing about these collaborating centers for you to understand is that with the work we have with them, we are able to have technical cooperation programs in many places around the world, and also support some of the work in countries, like it is the case, for example, for the Emirates with its very important nuclear program, which I'm sure you are quite familiar with. Of course, as first point that I would like to underscore before getting into the specifics of what we have been doing or what is being done here at the Emirates is that we are, as I said, a link. You are here, we are in Vienna, part of a link of wider scope and perspective. And I think it's very fitting that we do it here, that we recognize this commonality here in the Emirates, which is so characteristic by its nature as a place, as a meeting place, as a place where people converge from all over the world. This is quite unique in the Gulf and perhaps in the world as well. The multinational nature of this school and also of the nuclear sector. I was visiting the nuclear power plant complex in Baraka yesterday, and I could see many nationalities represented there. This is a very nice example and a very good segue to get into what is happening in the world. How is this program, which is so unique for the Emirates and for the Arab world, finds its place in a world that is a world which is rapidly changing and where I would say the imperatives of the moment require us to act in different ways. A few weeks ago, I was in a grayer and colder place compared with beautiful winter in Abu Dhabi, in Glasgow. And there, as you know, took place a very important international gathering, the Conference of the Parties of the Climate Change Convention. For those who are familiar with this jargon, it's the COP26 that took place. In other words, the meeting where the climate change issue was being discussed at a very high level because of the problems that we have with global warming, and following the last report of the International Panel on Climate Change, which is, as you know, a panel of the best and the brightest experts from all over the world. They described the current situation as red alert for humanity. This is not a group of activists, journalists, politicians, actors. This is a group like you, of scientists, that said, this is a very serious moment for all of us. It's a moment where we have to think long and hard of the decisions we take and how we prepare for them. And this is where, among other activities, the nuclear activity as part of the wider palette of energy alternatives we have comes into play. In the case of the Emirates, in the case of this country, we do have a very clear-sighted decision taken a few years ago. It may not be so evident for you, or perhaps it is, but for the external observer to think about an oil exporting country going into nuclear power seems either an eccentricity or a very strange idea. And it's not. The reality is that it is not. It is not on many accounts. On national accounts, of course, it would be for Emiratis to describe it more than for me as a friendly observer. But it makes a lot of sense when we see that thanks to the contribution of nuclear energy, in a few years, 25% of the energy consumed in this country will be clean, will be CO2 free. And this will make it easier for the country to decarbonize a bit faster its energy mix, and also, as part of the community of nations, for this nation to make its contribution to what is called, in the jargon of this climate change diplomacy internationally, the national determined contribution. What we, my country, Argentina, your countries, is contributing. What are we doing? What is the share of our decarbonization effort? And in this context, we can appreciate much better the importance for the economy internally here at the Emirates, and also internationally what is being done here signifies. And I think this cannot be overlooked in any way. So this is a very important factor, which, and I would invite you to zoom out from the Emirates and start looking a little bit on a wider perspective on what is going on in the rest of the world, and what is going on in particular in the area where I'm most expert in, which is nuclear energy. In March 2011, on a fateful Friday early afternoon in the northeast of Japan, a terrible earthquake took place, more than 9 points in the Richter scale, something unseen in Japan since the 8th or the 9th century, I believe. This earthquake was followed by a terrible tsunami which crippled one nuclear power plant in Fukushima. At that moment, many thought that this accident would signify the swan song of nuclear energy worldwide. And many thought that as a consequence of that, plans, programs, projects should be revised. Perhaps it was the case here, where your program was nascent those years. Luckily, as we see, a steady course was held, and the project is now a reality. But this had repercussions all over the world. And in many places, there was the idea that perhaps one should stop with nuclear energy. At the end of the day, this didn't happen. Although there is some narrative still prevalent, even through mass media, and I, as Director General of the IAEA, it's my day-to-day thing to talk to journalists, and even some of them, they still have this idea that perhaps nuclear energy is in a declining phase all over the world. Well, nothing could be far from the truth. Nothing could be far from the truth. Nuclear energy is growing, and is growing almost everywhere, with a few exceptions. The most important exception is one country in Europe, one very important country in Europe, perhaps the biggest economy in Europe, which is Germany, that took a decision, the so-called Energiewende, the great turnaround. Big turnaround, because Germany has been traditionally been one of the leading countries in nuclear technology, and they had a contribution of around 20-something%, close to 30% of nuclear energy in their mix. And they decided very drastically to move away from that. But apart from this example, and there were a couple more European countries that decided also on what is called in our jargon a phase-out, although in a very, I would say, slow way, which gives room for questions about the possibility that this decision could be turned around in time. We don't know. It's the case of Belgium, to a certain extent, Switzerland and Spain. But apart from that, nuclear is growing. It's growing in a very important way, even in Europe, where you have, for example, the leading country, France, moving on very decisively. I had the enormous privilege to be in France just a few days ago, and with President Emmanuel Macron, where he told me that 9 more new nuclear power plants are going to be built, among other things. And it's the same for Hungary, and it's the same for the Czech Republic, and it's the same from Slovakia, it's the same from Slovenia, it's the same for Poland, which is a newcomer, because Poland had decided to have some nuclear in the 80s. They stopped, and now they are moving forward. It's the case for Romania. And closer to Europe, although not exactly in Europe and not far from here, Turkey, a very important country, which is now in the process, in a very well advanced process of building nuclear power plants. If we continue our zoom out, we see, for example, that my next stop in this trip to the Middle East will take me tomorrow to Cairo, where I will be meeting with the President Al-Sisi, and there again a new and very dynamic nuclear program is taking place, with the construction of a number of reactors in El Daba. The same applies to the big emerging economies like China, where more than 20 nuclear power plants are being built at the moment as we speak. The same also applies to Russia, to India, even in Latin America. In Africa, close to you as well, South Africa has confirmed its nuclear program and the idea to move to new build. And as we did with your country a few years ago, some are starting to walk the walk towards nuclear. In particular, the agency is at this moment supporting Kenya, Ghana, Namibia as countries that are quite seriously looking into a nuclear program, and some others which are at an earlier stage but looking into this. So, as you can see, this trend, what does it tell us? It tells us that faced with the realities of the need to rebuild and to get back into a path of growth for our economies after the imposed recession driven by the pandemic we are still suffering from, faced with the necessity also to do it in a way that would not worsen the problem of global warming. Countries are looking to nuclear. Many continue in what they were doing, the confirmed nuclear states all over the world. The new ones are also doing that as nuclear is, and not promises to be, but is, as we speak, already producing almost today, almost a third of the clean energy. By clean, meaning without emissions of carbon dioxide in the world as we speak. And this trend, according to what I just described, is growing. Of course, there are those, and it is very important discussion to have, that have questions around nuclear, questions that the nuclear community and writ large, meaning the companies, the operators, the regulators, and the international organization that hosts the whole operation, the IAEA, must be addressing with utmost seriousness. In particular, issues like nuclear waste management and handling, something that is, of course, very, very palpable in contacts with civil society or the press, in particular in the West, where there is a strong sentiment that this is sort of an unresolved problem, something that we are passing on irresponsibly to the future generations in a selfish way. Nothing, again, is further for the truth. But we need to explain this. We need to inform the public in general about policies, practices that are in place to deal with high-level nuclear waste and how we are going to do it. Perhaps it's something we can discuss about later. So, as we can all see, nuclear energy, peaceful uses of nuclear energy, have a very important role in the world which is the one in which you, as young professionals, are going to be working and operating. As you know, nuclear industry is a highly integrating sort of activity where you go from geology through metallurgy, chemistry, and other specialties which this school specializes in, as I was just explained, and I saw in the corridor of innovation that I walked with the Vice President just now, to my delight. So, a world of promise and, of course, of great responsibility. Let me, before I stop and I would open for your questions, also refer to other things that I think and I believe are also important for us to be reminded of. And these are also, I would say, very important in a high house of studies like this university. And they have to do with the nuclear applications that go beyond or are non-power in their nature. Nuclear, or through nuclear, as you may know, we can make sure that people are treated from cancer, for example, radiotherapy, nuclear medicine, nuclear oncology. Radiotherapy is an activity where we at the IAEA are helping low and middle income countries to get access to nuclear medicine, training, capacity building, even hardware that we facilitate to them. In a month or so, a couple of months actually, in February, on the occasion of the World Cancer Day, I will be having the honor of launching at the African Union Summit a new and very ambitious program that the IAEA is leading, which is called Rays of Hope. And these rays of hope are the hopes that countries in Africa, where in no less than half of the countries in Africa, there is no single small radiotherapy unit. Not a single small radiotherapy unit in half of that huge continent. So there is a lot of work, and nuclear and the nuclear community, nuclear science and applications have a lot to do. Dr. Arif was explaining to me all that you have done here from the Khalifa University on COVID, and I praise you for this. We, from our humble place, have been trying to do the same. More than 130 countries turn to us for help. And you may ask yourselves, what does the IAEA have to do with COVID-19? Well, a lot. RT-PCRs are basically a nuclear technique, as those specializing in some of these disciplines may know. And we've been training countries, sending RT-PCRs in particular at the beginning of the crisis. But more than that, through isotopic tracing techniques, the nuclear science allows us to be very precise in the identification of almost everything, including pathogens present in zoonosis. So we have launched a program in collaboration with the World Health Organization, WHO, and the Food and Agriculture Organization in Rome, the FAO, and others under the One Health platform in the UN, which is called Zodiac, for zoonotic disease integrated action, where our experts in our laboratories in the outskirts of Vienna are putting together packages and programs to support veterinary labs. More than 300 veterinary labs all over the world, giving them the equipment and the training, in particular in areas which are prone to, because of the closeness of the human activity and the animal realm, which are prone to develop different types of zoonosis. In the region, you knew MERS just a few years ago. So we know how dexterity and how fast this zoonosis can develop, morph, and adapt to different environments. So we are trying through Zodiac to help countries deal with this challenge that we have. So, dear friends, as you can see, the IAEA is more than the nuclear watchdog that you may read about for those interested in international politics when you listen about the last crisis in a country not so far away from this, where nuclear program has been raising eyebrows, to put it very mildly, for a number of years, or in past crises in Iraq and Syria and other places. Yes, we do that. We do that. We check that those having nuclear materials will not deviate them from the peaceful uses we just described during this few minutes to other purposes. So we are more than that, and in doing that we are also extremely happy and proud to be working with institutions like Khalifa University, high institutes of knowledge where we can work together and promote, at the end of the day, what unites us all, which is a world that is better, that is safer, that is prosperous, where we all can live in harmony. I thank you very much for your attention, and as I said in the beginning, I would really love to hear from you. No question is a bad question. We can discuss about everything. If you want to discuss the politics of the region, nuclear, of course, and non-proliferation, I would be more than happy to take questions, or on any other aspects of those which I mentioned just now. I thank you very much for your attention. If you can please introduce yourself and tell me what are you studying or what are you doing?
Thank you very much for the presentation.
Yes,
Yes, I'm Dr. Nabil Marij. I'm a medical physicist.
doctor, yes.
Yes. First of all, we have been recently working with the IAA,
Yes,
Padwani from the ICTP, in designing and building our program, medical physics program.
yes,
It will start next fall,
yes,
next year. So this collaboration, yes, has been going on. But one of the concerns we have is for our graduates, the future graduates in
Yes.
physics. For example, in the UAE, we don't have residency programs for medical physicists. And I wonder if the IAEA can help, for example, facilitate placement of, for example, medical physics graduates in the countries where they have residency programs, because most hospitals, they require medical physicists not only to have a degree from a certified institution, but also to have an accredited residency. So I wonder if that's something that the IAEA can help with.
yes. Well, thank you very much, doctor, and thank you for this, for the work that you have been conducting with us. I would say the short answer would be yes, although there are, of course, a number of particularities to it. Through our technical cooperation program, we do have a unique network of activity all over the world with our 173 member states, and you must multiply that for a number of institutions, schools, medical schools, hospitals, clinics, with which we do work. So there is always a possibility to develop that into this kind of, I don't know if we could correctly describe it as placing people, but bringing people together, yes, of course. I'm doing this already with nuclear engineers, for example. With nuclear engineers, we have now started a line which may be interesting also for the university in other areas than medical, doctor, if you allow me. I have opened a line of more than dialogue, joint work with the industry. In the past, the IEA tended to be a bit more, taking a distance from the industry, was not so involved. We are in the 21st century. We are all together. We are in a world of incredible interconnectedness where working in silos is not a good idea. I think you all know it in the academic spheres. So, for example, now we have a program of fellowships, which I can discuss with you later on, where we are already establishing contacts with the leading nuclear companies in the world, and I can mention Rosatom, Westinghouse, EDF, your Korean counterparts in nuclear here, the Chinese CNNC, Mitsubishi, where they are helping us with our fellowships, and Urenco, and they are starting to look into our fellows to see whether there are possibilities to do that. We also provide some internships which could be of interest. I am here with a colleague from my technical cooperation program. You can be in touch with him, and of course we would be more than happy to start looking into if there are some concrete ideas. Yes, doctor, absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm a professor of mechanical engineering here. So thank you for your talk, and we are very impressed by your capacity and capability of IAEA. I do have a question for you. I'm not sure IAEA also looking at the deep space exploration, right?
Deep, sorry?
Deep space exploration. For example, nuclear power can be used to drive the moon base or Mars base, right? So for habitation of human beings. So that's very interesting from our side. Okay, thank you.
Well, in the area of space exploration, of course, the IAEA its remit is more limited, but we have been for a long time involved in nuclear propulsion for satellites and other space vehicles from perhaps a different perspective, which is the one of nuclear safety. But we do have some lines with them. I don't know more specifically what would be the case, but we can also, of course, with our technical cooperation colleagues here, look into some of these areas. Yes?
My name is Sheikh Abdullah, and first of all, it's an honor to see you in person. I would like to ask a question about thorium-based nuclear reactors.
So, Korean?
Thorium-based.
Thorium, yes, yes.
They are considered to be the alternative because they don't produce nuclear waste, which can be weaponized.
Yeah.
So there are, I think, 7 prototypes under research right now. So I would like to know in how many years we can expect them to be fully functional and operational, and can be,
Well, yes, there is indeed, Doctor, there is an intense interest. I guess you have some connection with India?
Yes, I'm from India.
Yeah, exactly. Well, in your country, as you know, for many, many, many years, there has been an intense work on this area, and in other parts of the world as well. The IAEA is deeply involved in these studies. We have produced dozens of technical documents, and we have periodic expert meetings on the cycle of thorium, where these things are analyzed. Of course, this issue is something which is linked with the market evolution itself. The interest on thorium started, as you know, in the 60s, and at some point it was thought to be the way forward, the logical way forward. Then the relatively low prices of uranium made that work important, but perhaps less urgent than once thought it could be. But again, there is a regain in interest, paradoxically. Because of the regain in interest in nuclear overall, people, and especially traders, and this is not about science, but money and greed, traders in uranium are looking at the curve in the uranium price, and they are making estimations, perhaps they are exaggerated, of the price of uranium going up in a very steep way, which some also consider might trigger some regain of interest in thorium. I think one way or the other, it is a very promising area, and the IAEA has been working and will continue to be working with India and other countries which are following this line in the years to come. I thank you.
So thank you for your talk. My name is Adriano. I am a PhD student in mechanical engineering. And regarding this, I know that the level of development of nuclear energy is at a very sophisticated level. But on the other side, I'd like to know as well about the level of the management of nuclear waste.
Yes.
Yes, I understand that it's not at such a sophisticated level. So do you have any prediction when that is going to catch up on the planet?
Yes. Well, it's interesting, Adriano, the way you put it, in terms of the relative levels of sophistication in terms of nuclear waste technology. I think there is a lot of sophistication there as well. There are many different ways to treat nuclear waste. First of all, and I think you are familiar with that in general, the issue is not unattended. Every gram of nuclear high-level waste is well protected in every nuclear facility in the world. This is something that must be known. Where issues come up is more, and not in the technology side, is more on the long-term disposition of the waste. Normally what happens now, and what will happen in Baraka, is that you have the fuel which is utilized, safely stored in bioprotected environments close to the nuclear power plant, in a pool, basically, using water as a great defense for the biosphere. then this waste is stored in a dry storing facility. And then, of course, because of the very long period of life of the radiation of the spent or the burned fuel, countries need to think in terms of the long-term disposition. And here we do have some experiences already, some in application. For example, in Finland, I visited the deep geological repositories, and one in the half island of Onkalo, which I visited, where the fuel is disposed in sealed caskets in highly stable geological environments of level of stability which is far longer than the length of the radiation activity of the... So I think there is a lot of sophistication. The issue perhaps is a different issue, and it's an issue of politics and social acceptance. This is the issue. This is the real problem, if you want. There is no technological problem. So when I have this kind of conversation, for example, all over the world, there's always, and I welcome this, somebody, normally environmentalists and people who don't like nuclear too much, that immediately and very emotionally talk about this. And what I tell them, while respecting their point of view, of course, is that the issue is more of a political or societal issue. I think that technology and the science has caught up with the process. The issue is how to explain it. In Western democracies, it is in a certain way. In other types of political systems, it may be in a different way. I think the common denominator, and here the IAEA tries to help all countries on an equal footing, is that there has to be a very high level, as we say now, of stakeholder involvement. People need to understand. And when people understand, normally, not always, normally these fears start to disappear when they are explained what is going to happen. And so much so that in some cases, for example, in Sweden, which is the next case of a deep geological repository, there has been fierce competition between two cities, small towns, in fact, in Sweden. There's one, Forsmark, which won the bid because they, once they got the assurances from a scientific point of view, they started looking at this in all its opportunity for engineers, for construction workers, for the local community, and everything that comes with it. So thank you for the question. It's one of the most topical issues in nuclear waste. Yes, sir.
I became an engineering journalist, and I remember distinctly interviewing researchers who were very optimistic about the potential of small modular reactors.
Yes.
So my question is, do you think the promise of these small modular reactors has been realised or is being realised?
Thank you, Professor. It's a very good question, because there is this joke about things that are the thing of the future and will always be. Fortunately, this is not the case for SMRs. As you I'm sure know, the issue of SMRs, the small and modular reactors. Small because they are physically smaller, small because their output in terms of thermal and electrical energy power is smaller from the ranges of, for example, for Baraka, from the thousands or the 1400s to 200 to 300 megawatts. And modular because they are built in a different way, they are fabricated and they are produced in factory and then put together. This has been discussed for a long time. I would say, Professor, at this point we are perhaps for the first time in the past 30 years looking at the real possibility that SMRs are going to be there. As you know, the United States, the Secretary of Energy, with whom I was discussing a few days ago, the British government, the French government are all putting money into this. And you know that normally when money is put into something it's because there is a real intention to do it, and it's going beyond the level of a project, an idea. Actually, there are more than 70 at the moment, more than 70 designs for small modular reactors. Quite obviously, not all those 70 will see the light of the day. But now I think with the French Newark, with the British Rolls-Royce, in the United States, people like Bill Gates is investing in TerraPower, Natrium, there's NuScale, there are lots of companies that are already working on this. So my impression is that we will start seeing small modular reactors in the market more or less in 5 years, 5 to 6 years, yes.
Hi, my name is Jade. I'm the science director at the university. You mentioned
Hello.
about social acceptance being a big problem. So I'd like to know what would be your one big message that you'd like journalists to share in order to encourage public acceptance of nuclear energy?
So the question, I cannot hear very well. The question is about social acceptability?
Yes, and in terms of journalism, what do you
Journalism,
think
yes.
is the most important message to be sharing?
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think this is a very important question and one where you know that people like to preach and not to self-criticize. And I think here there's a big point of self-criticism for the agency I lead now, and in general the nuclear sector. There has been some reluctance traditionally in the nuclear sector to be open, to confront the others, even when it's difficult. Even when it's difficult. The sector does not have this. And it's because of a combination of two factors. On the one hand, the excellence. Those who are in nuclear, like many in this room, tend to be excellent, tend to be people of incredible amounts of knowledge and skills and capabilities. And what I have seen in the past is that some of them, and it's a big them, I'm making an assertion here that is a bit all-encompassing, but in some of them I have seen a tad of arrogance in the past, in public discussions, when somebody comes and says, nuclear is dangerous. I could be irradiated if I live near a nuclear power plant. Apart from the political agendas that may exist, and we know about that. So I believe that, first of all, there must be a big degree of openness and work. Of course, be open to journalists. I do that. This takes a big chunk of my day, every day, to talk to them, but also help. And let me give you an example. At the moment, and for the first time, we at the agency are trying to develop a program to share information with journalists all over the world, journalists specialized in science and energy in general. We are working with a couple of governments that are very interested in this because they are, of course, facing the same kind of problem in their own countries. They are very active in nuclear and they realize that public perceptions sometimes are not ideal. And of course, if this was to be done by, I don't know, NAWA, the electrical company here, or EDF in France, of course there's a conflict of interest. People will say, yeah, these guys are explaining that this is fantastic because they're making the money with this. So here's where the multilateral organizations like the IAEA can play a role. Why? Because we don't have a horse in the race other than the horse of making good. I don't get a higher salary or my experts if we do what we do in the right way. So we are developing programs to work with journalists, to, I don't want to use the word educate because it might sound derogatory, but to give them information. We see often, the big outlets do have excellent, and I've met a few of them, very good energy experts, and those who know nuclear very well. But there are many who don't. And I've been confronted with this on many issues. Let me give you an example, and I'm sorry if I'm taking a bit longer in my reply, but it's something which I feel is very important. The issue of the treatment of the water around the Fukushima Daiichi power plant, where many people, of course, there are geopolitical agendas, and I will not get into that, why people are criticizing, certain countries are criticizing Japan. And you can have your own ideas, I have mine. And I know why certain people are doing certain things. But apart from that, there are lots of people who have legitimate fears, who believe that the Pacific will be glowing green when these discharges of water that has far less tritium than what exists already in nature is being this. But we have to explain this. We have to take the time, and we have to give guarantees. Because seeing is believing, but you have to prove. And my agency is about verifying. So we are doing all these things. So thank you for the question. It's a matter of constant, permanent engagement and working with schools, with journalists, with the public in general, to give information.
I just want to be the timekeeper, so I'll ask the last question.
Yes.
I think my question was taken by Dr. Athos, which about the small medium reactor. But my question goes into different from SME, which I believe there is some kind of interdisciplinary energy for the future for this kind of SMRs. My question is that nuclear is one part of the full spectrum of energy worldwide. Where do you see nuclear in 10 years, 20 years, given that there is a big competition from solar energy and other renewable energy?
Excellent question, Doctor. Excellent question. First of all, what we believe is that, or what I think is that our approach is not a beauty contest sort of approach. We are not in competition. We are not in, and should not be in competition, fossil versus hydro versus renewables versus nuclear. What we try to shape our narrative on is around science and facts. We can have preferences, but it's about facts, and we are working very closely with the International Energy Agency in Paris, not the Atomic Energy, but Energy Agency, which is, as you know, one of the biggest think tanks in energy in the world. And what you can see in any modeling is that the ideal energy mix is the one that wisely combines different sources of energy according to the particular circumstances, market-wise, geography-wise, technology-wise, etc., etc. Energy, which is a fascinating domain, shows us that there is no one-size-fits-all when it comes to energy. your particular situation in the Emirates is completely different from that in Japan, for example. Think about the geography, let alone societal factors, the history, the accidents, the politics, all of that, which are very important. So, in going closer, Doctor, to your question, what we see is nuclear energy in a gradual curve, growing curve, consolidating itself as a base load energy, very efficient in combination with renewables, which are, of course, very important and indispensable, and with other types of energy. And I think that if the market gets it right and our experts get it right, the introduction of the SMR is going also, but it's not depending on the SMR. I want to be very clear on this. It's not that nuclear, as some believe, depend on the SMR. Not at all. The SMRs will be added to the combination and will be providing an interesting additional factor. So what I see is at the minimum, and we have our own prognosis. The IAEA produces every year its prognosis of the nuclear energy trends. What we see is growth. What we see is growth in this combination. What I believe is that we have to work together like you do here in this country, very wisely, combining different things, including fossil fuels. This country depends heavily in its economy, its growth has been depending on this. So all these trends toward decarbonization must be wisely operated. It's not easy, or it is very easy from a comfortable desk somewhere to tell a country that it has to do away with the source of income for millions. And in your country, India, for example, or China, this is very important. To preach about coal, and we all need to set it aside. We all know what it does. But we need to come to wise decisions that bring these things into a harmonic whole. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, and good luck with your professional careers. Thank you very much.